Welcome to this segment of Keiser Report Summer Solutions Series. Okay, so revolving doors and money in politics, aka legal bribery, the nice democratic, transparent sort of corruption in which, oh, we're just lobbyists and or billionaires using our cash, which has free speech and even human rights, thanks to the U.S. Supreme Court studies have shown that the ordinary schmuck consumer citizen voter has exactly zero impact on the legislative bodies they quote unquote elect, for most laws are written by lobbyists from the very industries to which your elected representatives will decamp as soon as their public service, end quote, to you is over. Now, to find out if there are any solutions, it's time now to go to Los Angeles and speak with author Nomi Prins, who is currently researching her next book, Artisans of Money: The Rise of Central Bank Power, Artificial Markets, and Financial Warfare. Nomi, welcome to Summer Solutions.
Thank you, Max.
Okay, so Nomi, there are few more lucrative revolving doors than that between D.C. and Wall Street. Tell us about the scale of that revolving door.
Well, the revolving door between Wall Street and Washington is bigger than simply campaign contributions, bigger than super PAC contributions, bigger than the enormous number of lobbyists that continue to sprout going into Washington from Wall Street. It has to also do with these long-standing, multi-generational, multi-decade relationships between Wall Street and Washington, and the symbiosis that the two have in terms of running the United States domestically and also from an international and foreign perspective. So even going back to the first Securities Exchange Commission SEC head was Joe Kennedy, who was part of the contingent that raised money for FDR, who was a progressive president, put in the New Deal, put in Glass-Steagall to separate bank risk from the public's deposits. He was a guy who effectively was a major revolving door person, as at the time was Sidney Weinberg, who ran Goldman Sachs almost into the ground, but then thought it would be a good idea if he could turn around, be a part of FDR's financing team, and also get FDR's ear with respect to policies going forward. This was before lobbyists. So all of these individual relationships started back a long time ago, and they've been consistent throughout the years. We had David Rockefeller in the ear of basically all sorts of presidents, as we had Walter Wriston, who was the head of Citibank, and individuals who basically used the revolving door of appointments and not simply money in between Wall Street and Washington. Bill Clinton, of course, solidified that relationships by bringing Robert Rubin, who was the co-head of Goldman Sachs, into the Treasury Secretary Department. George W. Bush thought that was a great idea as well and brought Hank Paulson, who was the chair of Goldman Sachs, into running the Treasury Department. So the issue with Wall Street and Washington is it transcends simply money, which is a huge element, into these relationships that go on really forever.
Right. So let's get into some specifics here. So many Wall Street firms have now set up research departments in Washington, D.C., where insider trading is not illegal, by the way. And politicians are allowed to trade on inside information, and studies show that they, not surprisingly, outperform markets. Now, we don't call this corruption, but should we?
We should definitely. It is corruption. Insider trading is insider trading. The fact that we have a Congress that is above the laws that actually would bind ordinary citizens who don't have the ability to affect those laws or be Congress people taking leverage of them is definitely corruption. It's crime. It is insider trading. It's also corruption to have the campaign system that we have, the super PAC system that we have, the lobbying system that we have, connecting to the revolving door where individuals can come in and out of Washington, use policies, make them effective for the banks or other types of corporations that they come into or out of, and move on. We've had old Treasury secretaries like Tim Geithner move into Warburg. We have had Alan Greenspan move in and out of JP Morgan into other types of hedge funds. We've had the most senior people that run not just policy, not just are involved in creating and passing legislation, but actually run the major, most powerful institutions in our country, go in and out of the private sector in such a way that they benefit themselves, which is a problem, and also they benefit not just the private sector, but the individual companies to which they go. And that's part of the deal. Jack Lew, who is currently the Treasury Secretary of the United States, came out of a plum position at Citigroup, and one of the elements in his actual contract was that he would get paid a larger bonus if he went to get a bigger position in Washington. What did he get? He got to be the Deputy Secretary of State for Hillary Clinton and the Treasury Secretary for President Barack Obama. So he got a double whammy. That helped Citigroup. Move that forward, Citigroup was one of only 8 major banks in the United States who was said to have passed its most recent living will test. All other banks either failed or were called out by the Federal Reserve of the FDIC. The one bank that survived the test, which is in dire straits anyway, was Citigroup. Not ironic, because Citigroup, Jack Lew, same thing, just one sitting in Washington, one sitting in Wall Street. So there's a tremendous problem of not just corruption, but also really changing the very nature of what government does with respect to Wall Street because of the relationships that go back and forth between the two poles.
Nomi, you were a managing director at Goldman Sachs. Was there something in the culture there, or was there something you can tell us from inside the organization where they communicated, discussed, or put out forward this idea that the bank had a special relationship with politicians in Washington, D.C.?
First of all, they had a lot of fundraising elements that they were involved in, and they did have a relationship with Washington. It was almost unwritten because it was, when you get to that sort of an elite circle, and that is how they operate, the doors to Washington are never shut. They don't revolve. They're just simply continuously open. So the idea that anyone would go, any of the senior management would not be in office that day because they were in D.C. was a pretty regular occurrence. The idea was to continue to make Washington a place that worked for the benefit of Goldman Sachs. The special relationship went back, again, decades. It went back for multiple presidents on both sides of the aisle, and that was something that was very much a part of the culture of Goldman Sachs. You had, when I was there, Hank Paulson, who was obviously a Republican, became the Treasury Secretary for Bush, running the firm, but then you had Lloyd Blankfein, who is now running the firm, who was a Democrat and was more associated with the Clintons and so forth. So they really covered both sides of the aisle. That was not by just design, that was by these historic relationships. So the idea of Washington being close was very much a part of what went on. And so that continues. And also, it grows because right now we have Hillary Clinton potentially definitely going to be the nominee for the Democratic Party, definitely a friend of Goldman Sachs. It was Goldman Sachs that got Bill Clinton into the White House to begin with, Robert Rubin, that gave him the legitimacy to even have that position, to have us be the recipients of decades of Clinton-esque rule in Washington, and this is going to continue going forward. So though I have left, I know from inside and I know from outside that the special relationship with Washington remains not just coveted, but accepted. It's just part of the identity of the firm. All
right, now Hillary Clinton, she's received more donations from Wall Street than all the other candidates combined. She's made millions in speeches to the likes of Goldman Sachs, and yet she insists Wall Street expects nothing in return. Is that viable? And also, just out of curiosity, have you ever heard a Hillary speech while you were at Goldman Sachs? Nomi Prins.
Well, I was at Goldman Sachs before she needed to make money speaking there, but she, of course, she is beholden to the banking sector. Of course, the friendships, the associations, the money, the speaking engagement. I mean, it's all really part of being on the same team. The reason those transcripts aren't disclosed is not because, oh, that's not what they do, or any of the excuses that she gives on any given day. It's because the language, the sort of patting on the back, the I'm on your side, I get you kind of language is not something that she wants disclosed ever. And so what is said to Wall Street versus what she says to the public are definitely two very different things. And what she will do for Wall Street versus what she says she will do to the public are two very different things. She's on this sort of shadow banking kick in terms of saying her policies to fix Wall Street, to dampen the risk that Wall Street provides to the rest of the country is somehow better than, for example, Bernie Sanders' idea of breaking up the banks, of bringing back Glass-Steagall, of summarily making it illegal for an institution to have any ties to government, to deposits or to government aid in the case of a crisis or bankruptcy or any sort of negative factor. She has not said any of that. She talks about, oh, the shadow banking system, it's something I need to go after. And the language is almost as shadowy as the banking system. The shadow banking system is a bunch of financial institutions, whether they're hedge funds or private equity funds or other smaller private banks that receive their funding through the major big banks that are supported by the government currently legally. So she's not about to change any of that, and she's not about to really admonish any of that. And so whatever she says to a meeting or a speech at one of these institutions is merely to indicate she is on the same side. And maybe there's outside problems like the economy, like shadow banks, like something that doesn't involve them specifically, but that's merely to prove to them that she actually understands them and will help them. And they know this. They don't give her money just for the sheer hell of it. They give her money because she is one of their people. She has been one of their people for decades, and that's not about to change if she's in the White House whatsoever at all. And we will see that if she comes into the White House, if she becomes the president. We will have this conversation, you and I, Max, in 5 years from now, and we will see that she has done absolutely nothing, that the big banks are bigger. There's probably another crisis looming. There's a bunch of other corruption below the surface that we don't call corruption. We just kind of let it slide as business as usual. There'll be more multi-billion-dollar settlements with the big banks, and they will continue to go on with what they do.
All right, so you've done an excellent job in researching the historical evidence of banker shenanigans. And one period, of course, the 1920s, led to the crash of the 1929 era and the subsequent depression. Then you had, as you point out, historically speaking, the new rules and laws came in. You had the Glass-Steagall come in. You had the Securities Act of 33 and 34, of course, very famous. And you're also pointing to the fact that, like bookends, you've got the same criminals, almost the same bloodlines, committing the same acts in the same way. We have about 20 seconds left, but are the solutions to this situation today the same solutions as FDR brought in the 30s? That is to say, Glass-Steagall and other such acts. Nomi.
Yeah, they definitely are, because the solution isn't there's no solution that's going to keep the relationships from existing. There's no solutions that's going to keep people who went to Harvard together decades ago and their families decades ago to not continue to help each other and be on the same team. So you have to provide at least summarily legislative solutions like Glass-Steagall, like breaking up the banks, like reducing the percentage of market share of deposits and of assets and of derivatives and of trading that they are allowed to do, so that they cannot incur instability and risk onto the system. So there's two elements of law that really need to happen, because the relationships themselves are not necessarily going to happen. But we should strengthen this resolve to not have at least the revolving door from a functional perspective, at least require more years or infinity years for someone to go from a senior position in Washington to a senior position in Wall Street. And that actually can be a law. You cannot get the friendships out of the way. You can't get the mentality of being on the same social status page out of the way. But there are things we can do from a legal standpoint to at least alleviate the time between Washington and Wall Street, and also to cut the size of the banks, to cut the amount of their risk, to cut the percentage of assets and deposits that they control of our own money. So these are things that can be legitimate solutions, and part of them were enacted in 1933, and part were enacted throughout the decades that followed by both Republican and Democratic presidents before the banks woke up and said, no, we don't want to have any more rules. We're going to send more people in, and that's really what we're dealing with today.
All right, Nomi Prins, thanks so much for being on Keiser Report Summer Solutions.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank our guest, Nomi Prins. You can find her on nomiprins.com. Stay tuned for the second half. A whole lot more solutions.
I am not a terrorist.
I am not a terrorist.
I am not a terrorist.
These days, no matter where you are in the world, the chances are you're being watched.
Military drones have resulted in the deaths of thousands of innocent people and can strike any time.
Anywhere.
Flying at over 10,000 meters in the air.
You probably won't have the slightest idea you're being watched.
And if they attack, you won't see it coming.
What are we doing, rockets or hellfire? You turn off phone.
What we have seen in post 9/11 scenario, that in case of Pakistan, CIA had been given a license to kill.
They are bombing villages. There are villages there. There are houses. There are mud houses. They're bombing them. Sometimes they claim that they've killed a terrorist, and then you see he's alive. So who have they killed?
You made me kill children. For country? For profit? How can you smile?
The whole world was caught off guard by the attempted military coup in Turkey. But what followed afterwards has been no less dramatic. Mass arrests of the military, judges, and journalists, all on terrorism-related charges, have brought the word purge back into the geopolitical vocabulary. What does the future hold for Turkey? The European Union proclaims a democratic cause, but its real decisions don't always comply.
It is an ideology, it's an anti-government ideology, and it's deeply embedded in the construction of the Eurozone. It's also, if I may say so, not just an anti-government ideology, it's an anti-democratic ideology. It's a belief that actually you cannot trust democracies not to spend money.
The referendums have a meaning when their results don't fit the goal. This can be called a coup.
What happened in Ireland, Italy, Greece, I think one could easily call a silent coup d'etat.
È stato un vero e proprio colpo di Stato.
But not everyone is ready for this term.
I would not use the word coup. I would call it the way the system works.
Welcome to this segment of Summer Solutions. In the first half, we saw what happens when bankers own your elected officials. But other corporate lobbyists are making headway in convincing governments across the world to spurn their voters' demands and introduce policies and trade deals that threaten sovereignty and basic human rights. No other industry encapsulates this more than big oil, and in particular, the fracking side of the energy play. Not only did then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton travel across Europe to press governments to take on the quote-unquote controversial natural gas and oil extraction method, she succeeded. Nowhere more so than in the UK. With us today is Tina Rothery, who has been at the forefront of the fight to stop it. Tina, welcome back.
Hi, nice to be back.
Stacy, welcome.
Welcome to Summer Solutions. I must tell you it's summer because despite it only being just past noon, London looks like this. Now, Tina Louise Rothery, you have fought hard and long against fracking being introduced in the United Kingdom, but Hillary Clinton, she's broken those glass ceilings, breaking it by being such a strong uber woman traveling around Europe and convincing all these men and women who run Europe to take fracking. She won here. Fracking is now allowed in North Yorkshire. Tell us about that decision. Tell us how it came about and against what sort of opposition.
Okay, so the UK has only been fracked once. Let's not forget that bit. 2011, April, caused 2 minor earthquakes, loaded little bits of seismic up in Blackpool, so it was halted. Restarted again the potential to frack in December 2012. However, the planning went through again in Blackpool. We stopped it last July, and our councillors said no, based on the huge amount of opposition and the clear and present danger that fracking presents. However, they found a soft spot over in Yorkshire, a council that relates to a site called in a town called Kirkby Misperton. Now, the council there is primarily conservative. There's a pre-drilled site that was from old conventional drilling. So it was a lot easier to slip your planning through there. The vote was 7-4. Actually, one of the Conservatives actually did say no. It was 6 Conservative councillors and 1 right-leaning independent. And we knew it would go through. Now, there was 96% of all 99.2% of all correspondence relating to that planning was against it. And so despite that, they thought the 0.8% was enough, along with these 7 councillors, to say yes. However, what we thought was really odd at the time is ordinarily when the shale gas industry in the last 5 years, we watch the stock market in relation to them. Usually when they do a surge like that, something joyous happens, there's a surge on the market. Now, there was next to nothing. Tiny blip, which was really strange, because quite often when we do stuff, we read in the press that it says, you know, UK public shale gas opposition deters investors. So we've known for a long time that our government is both ignorant, fraudulent and corrupt. So we are probably better off trying to cut its supply line, which is the investors, by making them aware that we won't stop. So we are still 5 years frack-free. No truck has moved yet. There's currently loads of issues in Northern Ireland at Woodburn Forest at the moment. They're really mowing down protesters there, but they haven't actually got very far with the drilling. Scotland's still under a moratorium at the moment, now fighting to get a complete ban. We'll see where that one goes. But yeah, that's the current situation.
I mean, as you pointed out, the people spoke and the people were against it. Fracking first started in Texas, in Denton, Texas.
Yeah.
The people of Denton, Texas, after 5 or 6 or 7 years of fracking in their backyard, which has destroyed the value of their homes, destroyed their health, and destroyed their water, they voted in their own referendum to ban fracking. Higher authorities in the state came in and said, you're not allowed to ban fracking ever. So
Astounding.
I think this seems to be the sort of thing you're talking about here. In the first half, we talked to Nomi Prins about the revolving door between government and these corporations. So that certainly happens in Texas, where they banned the referendums available to welcome to summer, ban the possibility to ban fracking. Here, like, who are the corporate voices speaking? Who are the big corporations involved in this? Presumably Chevron and American
but also companies like. But see, we think they've sent a couple of small sacrificial guys forward first.
Yeah.
Quadrilla's not a big company. It's financed by Riverstone Holdings, which is financed by Kerrigan in China and AJ Lucas in Australia, and was previously headed up by Lord Brown, who's now nipped over to Russia to lend his services there.
He used to be at BP.
Yes, yeah. and he used to say that, you know, the Russians were the threat, and then suddenly when Quadrilla wasn't doing so well, he thought he'd join Russia. And of course, he's Lord Brown. He worked with the Department of Energy and Climate Change for many years and appoints people to their roles there. Department of Energy and Climate Change is our regulator.
So Tina, let's talk a little bit about your personal odyssey in all of this, because
what an odyssey!
You've stood up. You're like the Rachel Corrie, you know, against the frackers, and of course Rachel Corrie in the end met quite an unpleasant end, trying
to avoid that,
defend the rights of the Palestinians. But so you are taking on a cause against big fracking.
Yeah.
And now tell us what the current situation is.
Well, in 2014, in the summer. 26 primarily grandmothers took a field at 5 o'clock in the morning from under the noses of the security guards, and we held it for 3 weeks. We said we were leaving on a set date. We did a 50-person fingertip search, left it beautiful, told the farmer we'd gone. It was to draw attention to the fact that this field is earmarked for fracking, and loads of the elderly in the area had no idea that was going to happen. So we did that. We alerted the community. We felt it was the service they needed. And when we left, they then evicted us the day after we'd gone. And they ran up $55,000 in court costs doing that. They then said that it would be one of the nanas, someone from the nanas would have to take the hit, and that if someone didn't step forward, they would just find someone on video. And I was the poorest of our group, the nanas, so it was easier because they couldn't steal anything of mine. And so I stepped forward. So now I'm up in court on the 24th of June, and they'd like the money, or some reason why I can't afford to pay. I've explained that it's not that I can't afford to pay, which I can't. It's that I will not pay money to people to commit crime. So to me, morally, I actually can't fulfill this obligation. So what happens after that? I'm in a little bit of a quagmire. I'm not really entirely
Just
sure.
so you know, we are recording this before July, but this will air in July. Let's talk a bit about Quadrilla. Now, Quadrilla first became quite prominent when there was, they were covered in the news but not allowed to be mentioned. There was a corporation, we heard, who was dumping toxic waste off of Africa. That because of libel laws here, they were not allowed to mention it until a member of parliament stood up in parliament and said it was Quadrilla.
Yeah.
This was the corporation. So here the government knows they were already able to.
Wow.
It's like getting more apocalyptic now. As the summer solution. But so you're up against these guys who were allegedly or not allegedly dumping toxic waste off of Africa, and they were able to use the force of the law here to stop people from even knowing that. Now they've been given rights to frack your, your countryside. And of course, there's corporate confidentiality there. So it's proprietary what they dump into the water. Yeah. So how do you stop this going forward? What are you going to do? What is your plan of action?
Our plan of action is, you've already told us this before, how cash-strapped this industry is and what a boondoggle it is. And so we're kind of hoping in the end that the oil price, the lack of funding, might help us out in the end. And also, what have you got to fight with? I'm a grandmother. I have nothing but truth and a deliberate need, an obligation to protect my young. So nothing they can do can stop me protecting my young, and I will not, under any circumstances, do anything to make it easier for them. I know so many who the same.
As Max said, they were losing money when oil was $100 and something dollars. I mean, it's natural gas they're fracking, though, right? And there's an oversupply of natural gas. The prices crashed. They're not making money in America where there are no regulations. They have an exemption from the Clean Water Act. Here, they won't have an exemption from the Clean
However,
Water.
we have reduced our monitoring, which is interesting. We don't have a Clean Air and Water Act, so we thought, how are they going to get around that? We looked at it, and what it is they've underfunded air monitoring stations across the country. I think it was reduced by half. So if they do pollute, it's just going to be harder to spot it.
Well, now, Scotland has banned fracking.
Yes. Well, it's got a moratorium, and the ban was voted for, but it was a non-binding ban, and it has to come back up again in Parliament. So, yes, but they're strong against it. Actually, I'm up there next week, which is fantastic, because I was going up to rally, but now I'm going up to celebrate with them, which will be fantastic, because they are a strong force.
Another thing to look forward to, of course, is in Wyoming, there are famous photos you can see of abandoned oil fracking wells. They were abandoning those when oil was $100, but they weren't making enough money to pay all the investors, so they just abandoned the wells. And the company, they create individual companies, offshore vehicles, to own the fracking well. They go bankrupt, and presumably somebody in North Yorkshire, the taxpayers of the United Kingdom, will have to pay for the cleanup costs.
I mean, let's get to the bottom line. Why we just expressed why this is it's not economic to frack. It's a health hazard. Carcinogenics are everywhere. People don't want it. No. So why does it happen? Because the government guarantees the bank loans. Government guarantees the bank loans. These are banks that are technically insolvent, and they're looking for more fees to keep the charade going that they are solvent. And the government steps in to say, this is a horrible industry. It kills our people, and it's a disaster ecologically, but we'll guarantee the loan as a way. It's a bailout for the banks. It's nothing to do with energy.
The banks can't lose on this.
They can't lose on it because it's like a bailout. In other words, the government could just bail out RBS and HSBC and Lloyd's and these other banks.
Barclays is one of the worst.
They could just write them a check, but instead they're going to say, we're going to guarantee a loan to this dead industry of fracking, wink, wink, and here's your subsidy.
It's been a really strong call out for a boycott of Barclays. People are cutting their cards, changing banks.
It worked during the apartheid era.
Yeah. Oh, but they're banning boycotts to anything to do with apartheid, but it's time to go.
Oh, we gotta go.
The apocalypse is upon us.
Tina, gotta cover the apocalypse.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me again.
That's it for this Summer Solutions episode of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. I'd like to thank our guest, Tina Rothery. If you'd like to get in touch, tweet us at Keiser Report. Until next time, bye, y'all.